Hello and welcome to another Office 365 Hours. My name is Christian Buckley. I'm the Microsoft Go-to-Market Director at AvePoint, a Microsoft MVP and a Regional Director. And I'm joined today by Darrell Webster, a fellow Office Apps and Services MVP, Principal Microsoft 365 Adoption and Change Consultant with WM Reply, and founder of Modern Workplace Change, and a bunch of other things that Darrell does out in the community. But good morning, Darrell.
Hello, Christian, and thanks for having me.
It's great. This is a fun topic today. We're going to be discussing the topic of Microsoft Teams and the flow of work. So I know you've been writing on this topic and talking about it in a few videos that are out there on this topic of the flow of work. There are many subtopics within that. So I know in our 30 minutes today, we're going to try and stay focused there, but who knows what direction it could go. It's live. So why don't we start with question number one? How do you define the flow of work? And how has the way that we worked evolved and changed in recent years?
I started by probably talking about it from a learning point of view. And there was a chap by the name of Josh Bershin who shared this concept around the flow of work. He talks a lot about how people learn at work and education side of things. It's picking up skills for their jobs. And I think it was around 2018 he started talking about it, blogging about it, and it was this concept of what we used to have traditionally with your half-day training, your sort of lessons, and sort of transitioned into videos and different LMS platforms. And there was more and more a need for learning quickly and in the context of what you're currently doing. And IT and technical people know this really well because we often have a question to ask and answer, and we need that answer now. So we go to search for it, find a video on it or something. We found our answer. We're back to what we were doing beforehand. And that's the kind of thing about being in the flow of work. It is, from a learning point of view, what can I find out quickly? Widen that concept for flow of work and in terms of what we're trying to currently do, the current task. Flow of work is about trying to stay in that zone and not context switch so much.
Right. I know there are third-party solutions that are out there that have helped over the last few years. Microsoft has developed some solutions there, but this idea that I'm in this complex interface, whatever operating system, whatever the company has people working within, and rather having to, I want to go out to a separate page and search on the topic and find resources that are there, right in context of that workload. I have these tools. I have video assets. I have search terms come up. And so Microsoft has done a number of things to help around this. In fact, and I will talk about a little bit later, but Microsoft Viva, it addresses some of those in context learning capabilities. It's a space that is really expanded. But I've been of the opinion for many years here that conversation in all of its forms. So whether it's chat, whether it's video, meetings, even sticky notes, the digital sticky notes that are within Outlook and OneNote and other places, but all of those are the glue that really bring together and bind together the context around our information management systems. In fact, I think that's been one of the things that has been missing for many years around information management systems, knowledge management. SharePoint is a great example that we focus so much on the documents and files, and we forget about the 20 conversations, the chat messages that happen that connect two documents together and give it that context, give it that relevance. So with all of those components, and the increase in the use of apps in conversations, are organizations doing a better job at kind of keeping track of this, or where are we in kind of our growth and understanding that of this connecting
Well,
tissue?
I put it in a scenario story. Um, Probably a number of us watching the show today have had to recall something, some information, a conversation, an attachment, some kind of piece of information. And like you say, Christian, it is often the conversation that gives us that context and that anchor of what that important piece of information was. We recall that and we think, oh, that's right, I was talking to Christian about this. And so when was it? And what did I must have attached it to something. And so we go back to that conversation and then we pick up that thread and we find that information. And so many of us, that's our starting point for finding that information. We're trying to recall the conversation and the context around it. With teams, they've done a lot of work around that, you think about the product itself, its core is around conversation. You're in a team and you have a conversation tab in every channel. Your files are just attached to that, but they're the next most important thing. And then every other tab, any other asset or whatever, you discuss things alongside it. So how are we doing with that? I think we've got so many options that within this, central OS for work sort of thing, we need to try and reevaluate how to stay in the zone and stay focused on what we're doing. And it actually comes down to those lower level ways of getting information quickly while you're in a conversation, or vice versa, while you're in that information, how do I go back to that conversation quickly and stay in the task that I'm on?
And another side of it is keeping those things organized. So I mean, every day there seems to be somebody commenting on their frustration with, and we're talking about inside of teams, like the navigation or the complexity of how many different teams that they're a member of and all the notifications that come up. And there's great requests that came up. In fact, just saw one today where somebody said, well, instead of just a generic notification, that it tells me, it notifies me, it actually has the team notifications. There's something that makes it easier to go and navigate and pay attention to those things. And as somebody who I pin channels, have pinned teams, I'm constantly going in and hiding or unhiding based on my level of activity and things to make sure that I have as much focus as can be in that place. But it's a problem for people.
Definitely. Interesting side comment about that notification, and we've all had them. Teams. There's a team member that's trying to get hold of you or trying to tell you something important, I think is the phrase. If you ever noticed that, and I'm just an iPhone user, but have you ever noticed that you can only see so much of that notification message, but if you hold your phone around the other way, you see a whole lot more. Yeah, it's supposed to draw you back into the product, isn't it? And this was something about Yammer too, that it sort of toed and froed between, we're going to give you the whole message. You can interact with it completely from email to actually we're just going to give you the first 200 characters or so, and you'll have to go through the product. And now we've got adaptive cards that actually bring you right into that conversation, and you don't have to leave email to interact with Yammer. This is all part of the story, is what can I do where I am right here, right now, without leaving the product, without changing the window. And I think, like in the team sense, some of those apps that are in conversation are probably undervalued. I look at let's say the Stream app, for example. So there's a lot of things happening with Stream at the moment, but it came out where like you can have a conversation, you can use this little Stream app while you're in conversation and find the video that you're after and share it. And you think, well, okay, big deal. I'd rather go to the full product, thanks. But what happens when you step out to that full product? Ooh, what's that? Oh, I didn't see that before. I've got to search for this, so I've got to think this, and this, and this. And before you know it, you're completely out of the zone of whatever conversation or task you were talking about. And that's what Microsoft is working on. I bring it back to the most simplest and most effective thing that we've seen over years, the recently used files list. And that's really amazing. Like, you think about it, it's so simple. It's been out there for ages. but it keeps you in context, and it's got so much better now that this is what you had open recently. This is what you were talking about recently with someone. So surely this is what you're after. Don't worry about going to use Microsoft Search or SharePoint Search to find that. I've got it right here. Click. It's done. Now get back to your conversation.
I'm actually a huge fan of the timeline feature in Windows, and I've not yet played with the beta of Windows 11, but my understanding is it's disappearing.
Yeah, yeah. I slipped into the beta zone and tried it out for a bit, and there's a few things that need some work. But I think people are going to miss some of these ways of working they've developed to try and clue themselves back in, or give themselves hints to bring them back into focus, and that's one of them that certainly people will miss.
Well, something I know that some people aren't aware of, that Yammer is back on a growth pattern. And so it's really been expanding faster than some other leading Microsoft products. I'll let them make announcements around that. There. But anyway, one of the things which I believe has led to that growth has been the integration capabilities, the integration with Teams and with Outlook. And while there's room for improvement there, but it's kind of, as you mentioned, to get those notifications to draw you back into the native application. But if you're in that flow of work and I'm overworking in email, I can still get that notification. I don't have to be monitoring actively 3 different applications, Outlook, Teams, and Yammer, to be able to see and participate in those interactions.
I think it makes me think of another bit of research, and a point that I dug up was the more tasks you're trying to multitask, that switching time of regaining focus increases. There was some stats around from the American Psychological Association research talking about 40% of employees, they lose that cost of productivity time by just simply adding another task. And another psychologist talked about how the more tasks you add, you've got to account for 20% switching time. So if you're working across 3 different apps, and even if that's sort of related to what you're doing right now, the danger of seeing something that's going to distract you, or trying to get back to that original thread of what was I working on again? Add 20%, add 20%. And before you know it, you've like 60% switch time versus 40% productivity across the two apps or zones. It's so quickly you can lose your thread.
I don't think that's a stretch for people that have project management backgrounds, where we always add on that percentage, to actually get things done, especially moving between projects. I learned that lesson early on. It's kind of like a math teacher who's instructing you on how to do a calculation, but doesn't explain why you do some of the different components. Is you just add 1 to this. Like, I was one of those kids, why do you add the 1? And finally it took a stats teacher at university to walk me through something, and here's why we add this and do this way. I was like, okay, I'll never remember the detail of that, but I was able to accept it because it was explained at least one time. But so with all the different components, there's so much that's going on. I mean, Microsoft is adding new features every week. And I know we've had this conversation before of, how do you keep up? How does anyone keep up? It's one of the most common questions asked to MVPs is, how do you stay on top of everything? And I always say the number one answer is, well, we don't.
Yeah. I think it's also a choice of, let's reverse that question. Do we need to keep up? Do we need to really keep up with everything? This consumerization of IT, and that, offering value by saying, look at us, we've created 50 new features in the last 3 months. Here they all are. We've talked about them. Look, I make it my business to actually focus on that and try and tell people, make sense of what it all is. But what compels us to have to use every single thing? We've really got to step back and go, what is my need, and do I need to fill that, or do I just focus on what I currently know and just add to that?
Well, So I guess I understand the difficulty for some organizations there. Somebody has to be paying attention to all of the different things that are coming in, all of the new features, and saying, hey, this is something that impacts all of my end users, impacts our business. We need to pay attention to this. But the other things are nice to know, but don't impact their background things, more administrative capabilities, and don't worry about it. But if you don't have somebody that's doing that kind of traffic control for you, then how do you know what you should be paying attention to, or things that don't really change your life in the way that you work? This, it would seem, would be a huge part of overall adoption and engagement, this cloud world, this cloud first world that we live in.
And I think it's something I learned early on when I joined the tech community. And it was based on Yammer, it was based on another platform before that. But the key concept around community with technology is that everyone keeps everyone up to date, that it's all about the observations we make. And if you can take that same concept into your workplace and encourage people to share what they're seeing, share what they know, share their observations, then everyone keeps everyone up to date. And they actually bring more context to that update. It's not a case of, well, it's someone's job to try and come up with some special course to make sense of all that. That's part of it, but I think the greatest learning, again, comes back to conversation around content and updates, and that becomes
exactly
that glue.
what we're talking about. Yeah,
yep.
yeah. But I think that's great, because you think if you have the release notes, of course you have the platform, the tools that you're working with. So you have those artifacts which Microsoft delivers, they don't change. And then there's all of the conversation that happens in between that, which really sets the context for those release notes, sets the context for the change in the UI that we've seen. Here's what's, and then have a conversation. Hey, here's something to worry about. Or like today, I saw some news come out last week, something internally, and I got two different people, two parts of the organization sent me emails this morning saying, hey, did you see this change? Do you know what the impact is? And be like, this part of it, no impact. This other thing, huge impact. And so we had that conversation. We're sharing that out through that network. But that's how it happens, is through conversation. It's much more organic method than just saying, hey, go take a look at this video, or look at this update, or look at the release notes. Yeah. I always use an example of when I went to work for my first huge company, pretty much. Anyway, started with the phone company my first week, and I was taking over as a project manager a number of things. There was actually somebody who was retiring on the team, and he said, everything you need to know is in this binder. It's this massive 3-ring binder. It was like this thick. And I would go and ask a question about something, because I got involved immediately, drinking from the fire hose, involved in meetings, and say, what is this process that gets in the binder? I spent the first week like hours flipping through, trying to find stuff. And inevitably, I would find a process flow or some description, a walkthrough of something. And I just had questions. And so I ended up going back to this guy. I spent most of his last week annoying him, I'm sure, with question after question, and writing in between the lines within this documentation. I said, I don't want anybody to have to go through this experience again of pulling it out. Technically, he delivered the process at its core of that capability, but to do my job was everything else was not included within the binder.
And look, you had to step aside and spend a good amount of time searching through that, getting familiar with how that information was organized. It took you out of the flow of work, but the answer was there. It was in this manual that hopefully was kept up to date. But imagine being able to do that in the flow of work, where the question you had was a little underlined, highlighted topic or term, and you click on it and you find, okay, that's what this topic is about, and these are the steps that I need to know, and here's the experts that talk about this all the time. And that's, really the core thing around Viva Topics, that it is still in the flow of work, but you're finding information out when you need it, and you also know who to go to get a bit more context.
You talked a bit about topics. Maybe we can kind of wrap up on this not small question here about, what are the impacts of Microsoft Viva? And I know impacts of the flow of work, and specifically there's the learning module, but topics is a big part of the flow of work as well. So what do you see as the impact of Microsoft Viva on the flow of work?
I think it has been designed around the flow of work. I know that you can look on it and say it's just a reorganization of some products that are already out there. Yeah, that's true, but there are some new experiences and some pretty smart stuff happening in the background. And it's around the employee experience. And I think what's really key to the employee experience is helping them to remain focused in the flow of work, because people want to feel productive and that gives them satisfaction. So the likes of topics will help you to find your information faster and connect with people who also know about that topic. There's Viva Learning, which is also talked about having learning in the flow of work. Now, I think there's going to be some interesting journeys and differences there too, because true learning in the flow of work is micro learning, isn't it? It's watch that 2-minute video, that 5-minute video, not that 20-minute video, or let's watch this series which has about 3 hours worth of content. So you can do both in Viva Learning, where you get to see a bit more of what that experience is like, but it's about delivering experiences while you're in the flow of work and simplifying that. So that you can get that information, but also stay on task.
Well, hopefully organizations too are looking at and saying, where are people accessing this knowledge? Where are they asking questions? Where are we finding that there needs to be more learning, more education around this? It's almost like, we're getting to a place where we need like a heat map capability that actually shows it. Like you can do this with like UX design, with website traffic, where you can actually see the patterns. Where are people looking and clicking? You can kind of learn that through some of the Viva capabilities. What are people actually doing? It might be hey, there's a huge lifestyle where all these people are asking these questions or accessing support documentation in this one area. That should be an indicator. Maybe we need to strengthen our training, strengthen our education around certain areas, or maybe the UX is weak, or whatever that is. But that's learning about how people are collaborating by watching how they collaborate.
Yeah, by stepping back and actually looking at the bigger picture. Yeah, I'd like to see that. It'd be quite cool. I know you can do this with search, going through and seeing what are people searching, but having that holistic picture of also, well, what are people talking about? What are people asking about? What are people having conversations about, and drilling deeper into those conversations? And it seems like an unimportant kind of task to go through, but it's directing the flow of information. And if you can shorten that distance between the task that they're on and the information or the people they need to find out, they can get back to that task and keep on focusing.
Well, that's the key there. I think that's the real learning is we've said for a long time, information management in the SharePoint world, what we both come from is it's about making available, finding the right information at the right time by the right people, and putting that into action. And I think that there's still a lot of room for growth and improvement there.
Yep, certainly.
Well, Darrell, really appreciate your time today. Folks that want to find out more about you, get in touch with you. What are the best ways to reach you?
I'm Darrell as a service on Twitter and most other social places. I am blogging at modernworkplacechange.com, and I have a YouTube channel along the same name. So trying to explore more of those modern workplace scenarios and making it easier to understand and get the change across to your organization.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and really appreciate it. Once again, please subscribe to the Office 365 Hours. You sign up, you get the notifications on our next show, which show up every first and third Wednesday of the month at, what are we at, 11 a.m. Eastern. So thanks for watching. Thanks a lot.
Bye now.